Winter in the Dakota Territory, 1877. A merciless blizzard descends upon the frontier without warning. In the chaos of the storm, Abigail Bennett, the wife of a hopeful settler, disappears into the swirling white void. With temperatures plummeting and hope fading, one man steps forward. Running Fox, a Lakota brave from a nearby encampment. Two worlds that had clashed in suspicion and sometimes violence now share a common threat. Against the warnings of both his tribe and the desperate settlers, Running Fox embarks on what many believe to be a suicide mission, tracking a woman he's never met into the heart of one of the deadliest winter storms to ever punish the plains. This is a story of courage that transcends cultural boundaries, of survival against impossible odds, and of humanity found in the harshest of elements. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The winter of 1877 had been unforgiving from the start. By early December, the Dakota Territory lay shrouded beneath 3 feet of snow, with drifts that climbed higher than a man on horseback in some places. The settlers at Eagle Creek had prepared as best they could, but no amount of preparation seemed adequate for what Mother Nature had unleashed. Among these hopeful pioneers were Thomas and Abigail Bennett, a young couple from Pennsylvania who had arrived just 18 months earlier. Thomas, a former carpenter with dreams of raising cattle on the open plains, had built them a sturdy cabin on the eastern edge of the settlement, near where Eagle Creek cut through a shallow valley. Abigail, 24, and still adjusting to frontier life, managed their home with quiet determination. Though the isolation sometimes weighed on her, she'd grown to appreciate the raw beauty of the territory, at least until winter had bared its teeth. 10 miles to the northwest, along the sheltered banks of Blackwater River, the band of Lakota led by Chief Grey Wolf had established their winter camp. Among them was Running Fox, a respected hunter and scout of 30 winters, the son of a medicine woman and a warrior who had fought at the Little Bighorn. Running Fox walked a careful line between the old ways and the rapidly changing world. He served as an occasional interpreter and liaison with the white settlers, earning him respect from some whites but suspicion from certain tribal elders who feared too much contact with the newcomers. The relationship between the Eagle Creek settlement and the Lakota band remained cautious but peaceful. A tenuous trade arrangement had developed over the previous spring, with the settlers exchanging tools and fabric for meat and furs. Thomas Bennett, more open-minded than many of his neighbors, had twice welcomed Running Fox into his home when the Lakota brave brought news or traded goods. Abigail had found Running Fox fascinating, not in a romantic way, but as a window into a world so different from her Pennsylvania upbringing. She asked questions about Lakota traditions that surprised both her husband and their visitor with their thoughtfulness. Running Fox, in turn, found her curiosity refreshing rather than intrusive, and answered with a candor he rarely showed to outsiders. That fragile bridge of understanding would soon be tested beyond anything either community could have imagined. The storm announced itself first as an unusual stillness on the morning of December 12th. The normal sounds of the prairie, the whistle of wind through the grass, the call of birds, the distant lowing of cattle, fell away into an eerie silence. The sky to the northwest turned the color of a fresh bruise. In the Bennett cabin, Thomas watched the approaching darkness with growing concern. He had planned to ride into the settlement that morning to help frame the new schoolhouse, but the weather gave him pause. "I don't like the look of those clouds," he told Abigail as she prepared breakfast. "Jeb Parker says when the sky turns that color, it means snow's coming, and plenty of it." Abigail glanced out the small window. "Perhaps you should stay home today." Thomas sighed, torn between responsibility and caution. "The men are counting on my help, and we need that school finished before spring. He ran a hand through his sandy hair. "I'll go, but I won't stay long. First sign of snow, I'll head straight back." Abigail nodded. Through her eyes lingered on the darkening horizon. "Take the heavy coat, then, and be careful." By mid-morning, Thomas had reached the settlement center, where 5 men already worked. On the skeletal frame of the schoolhouse, the air had grown heavy and still, the temperature dropping rapidly. Jacob Winslow, the settlement's unofficial leader, greeted Thomas with a worried frown. "Bennett, glad you made it, though I'm wondering if we shouldn't pack up and head home. That's a blizzard brewing if I ever saw one." Thomas helped secure a crossbeam before responding. "My thoughts exactly. Let's get this section finished at least." They worked quickly, glancing repeatedly at the approaching wall of clouds. The first flakes began to fall just before noon, large, wet flakes that quickly gave way to a driving sheet of white. "That's it," Winslow shouted over the rising wind. "Everyone home now. This isn't letting up any time soon." The men scattered to their horses and wagons. Thomas mounted his mare and turned for home, leaning forward against the intensifying gale. The temperature was plummeting, and the snow was already accumulating at an alarming rate. What had been clear ground 20 minutes earlier now bore 3 inches of powder, with more falling so fast he could barely see 20 feet ahead. Halfway home, the full fury of the blizzard engulfed him. The mare struggled forward, head lowered against the punishing wind. Thomas's face burned with cold, despite the scarf he'd wrapped around it. He could no longer distinguish the trail and was navigating by instinct and his knowledge of the land. When the Bennett cabin finally emerged from the swirling white, Thomas nearly wept with relief. He stabled the mare quickly, ensuring she had hay and unfrozen water, then fought his way to the cabin door through snow that already reached his knees. "Abigail!" he called as he burst through the door, snow swirling in behind him. "Thank God! This storm is turning vicious," but the cabin remained silent. "Abigail?" Thomas called again, louder this time. He moved through their small home, checking the bedroom, the pantry, even foolishly looking under the table as panic began to rise in his chest. On the kitchen table lay a note, its corner held down by a cup. "Thomas, Mrs. Larson sent word her. A baby is coming early. She asks for my help as the midwife can't make it from town. Back soon." Athamas stared at the note in horror. The Larson homestead lay 3 miles to the south. Abigail must have left shortly after he did, not knowing how quickly the storm would intensify. Without hesitation, he pulled his coat back on, though it was still wet with melting snow. He rewrapped his scarf, pulled on a second pair of gloves, and plunged back out into the howling blizzard. The 3 miles to the Larson homestead might as well have been 30. Thomas fought through snowdrifts that sometimes reached his waist. The wind screamed across the prairie, driving ice particles that stung like needles against any exposed skin. Twice he fell, the second time losing his bearings entirely, until he realized he was walking with the wind rather than across it. By the time he spotted the lantern light from the Larson cabin, his extremities had gone numb, and his movements were becoming clumsy, the first dangerous signs of hypothermia. Sarah Larson's face registered shock when she opened the door to his pounding. "Mr. Bennett! Good heavens, come in before you freeze solid!" Thomas stumbled inside, barely able to form words through his chattering teeth. Abigail, is she here?" Sarah exchanged a confused glance with her husband Peter, who stood nearby holding their 2-year-old son. "Abigail? No, we haven't seen her." "The baby," Thomas managed, his mind struggling to make sense of the situation. "False alarm," Sarah explained, helping him remove his frozen outer garments. "Just practice contractions. Peter wrote to tell the neighbors not to worry after all. He only just got back himself before the worst hit." The room seemed to tilt beneath Thomas's feet. "She left me a note. Said you sent for her, that the baby was coming." Peter Larson's face was drained of color. We sent no such message." For a moment no one spoke, the implications too terrible to voice. Then Peter broke the silence. "Someone played a cruel trick, or there was a misunderstanding. Either way, your wife is out in this storm." Thomas pushed himself up from the chair Sarah had guided him to. "I have to find her." Peter grabbed his arm. "You'll die out there, and that won't help Abigail. The temperature's dropping by the minute, and visibility is near zero." "I can't just sit here while she freezes to death," Thomas shouted. "Listen to me," Peter insisted. "We'll organize a search party as soon as there's a break in the storm. Going out now is suicide, plain and simple." Thomas sank back into the chair, his head in his hands. "She's out there because of me, because I left." Sarah placed a steaming cup of coffee in front of him. "Drink this. You need to warm up. And Abigail is smart. If she realized she couldn't make it here, she might have turned back or sought shelter somewhere else." Thomas nodded mechanically, though he took no comfort in the words. He knew Abigail was resourceful, but the Dakota blizzard showed no mercy, not even to the most experienced frontiersman, let alone a city-raised woman from Pennsylvania. The storm raged through the night, with wind howling around the cabin and snow piling higher by the hour. Thomas didn't sleep, instead pacing the floor when he wasn't peering uselessly into the white void outside the windows. By morning the snowfall had slowed, but the temperature had dropped further, and the wind continued to drive the loose snow into massive drifts. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Peter Larson emerged from checking the animals in the barn, his face grim. 24, below zero by my thermometer, and that's not counting the wind. We need to get word to the settlement, organize men and supplies for a search. Thomas nodded grimly. "I'm going now. Back to my place first, in case—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "I'll come with you," Peter offered. "Sarah can manage here." The journey back to the Bennett cabin took over 2 hours, though it would have been a 40-minute ride in good conditions. They had to break trails through snow that sometimes reached their chests in the deeper drifts. The cabin stood empty, with snow blown in under the door and through a window that had cracked in. The wind. Of Abigail there was no sign. Without pausing to rest, they pushed on toward the main settlement. Word of Abigail's disappearance spread quickly, and by early afternoon, 12 men had assembled, equipped with ropes, lanterns, food, and extra blankets. Jacob Winslow took charge, organizing the men into teams of 2. "We search in spirals from Bennett Place," he instructed. "Stay close to your partner, mark your trail, and report back by sunset no matter what. A second night out there." He left the implications unspoken. The search continued until darkness made further efforts impossible. They found no trace of Abigail, not even footprints, which had been erased by the driving snow. The men returned to the settlement, exhausted and frost-bitten, to warm themselves and prepare for another day of searching. Thomas refused to rest, having to be physically restrained by Winslow and 2 others when he tried to continue the search. "Alone in the darkness. You're no good to her dead," Winslow told him bluntly, "and that's exactly what you'll be if you go out there now." That night, as the settlers gathered in the town's small church to warm themselves and plan the next day's search, an unexpected visitor arrived. Running Fox entered silently, causing a stir among the assembled settlers. Many reached instinctively for weapons, before recognizing him as the Lakota who occasionally traded with them. He approached Thomas directly, speaking in careful but clear English. "I hear your wife is lost in the snow." Thomas nodded, too exhausted and distraught for suspicion. "Since yesterday morning, we've found no sign of her." Running Fox's dark eyes showed no emotion, but his voice carried a note of respect. "The woman who asks many questions, who treats my people as human beings." He paused. "I will help search." Winslow stepped forward. No offense meant, but what can one Indian do that 12 of us couldn't? Running Fox turned his steady gaze to the settlement leader. Your eyes see, but they do not know what to look for. The snow hides much, but not everything. And I know places your people would not think to search. He's right, Thomas interjected, a desperate hope kindling in his eyes. Running Fox knows this land better than any of us. If anyone can find her. Some of the settlers muttered objections, their distrust of Indians overriding practical considerations. But Thomas's endorsement, coupled with their growing sense that Abigail's survival was becoming increasingly unlikely, silenced most critics. I will begin at first light. Running Fox stated, alone, others will slow me down. Before anyone could object further, he turned and vanished back into the night. True to his word, Running Fox was gone by dawn, having declined offers of shelter for the night. The settlers resumed their search as well, though with diminishing hope as the second day of Abigail's disappearance dawned brutally cold and clear. Running Fox moved across the frozen landscape with practiced efficiency. He began not at the Bennett cabin as the settlers had, but at the false trail that had led Abigail into the blizzard. From the Larson homestead, he worked backward, studying minute signs invisible to less experienced eyes. A broken twig beneath, the snow here, a slight depression there. By mid-morning he had found something the settlers had missed, a single red thread caught on a thorny bush, matching the description of Abigail's woolen scarf. The trail led not south toward the Larsons, nor northeast toward the Bennett cabin, but west toward the rugged country along Rattlesnake Ridge. Running Fox followed the subtle signs with growing concern. The woman had become disoriented in the whiteout conditions, heading deeper into dangerous territory rather than towards safety. Her tracks, what little remained of them, showed increasingly erratic patterns, the wandering of someone suffering from cold and confusion. At the base of the ridge, Running Fox paused. The natural caves that dotted the escarpment offered potential shelter if Abigail had found them, but they also harbored mountain lions and other predators seeking refuge from the storm. He climbed steadily, checking each crevice and overhang. In the third cave he found the remains of a small fire, long extinguished, and a torn piece of fabric that matched the thread he'd found earlier. She had been here, found shelter, even managed to start a fire. But then I moved on. Why? Perhaps driven by confusion and the advancing hypothermia that makes victims paradoxically feel overheated, causing them to shed clothing and leave shelter, a phenomenon Running Fox had witnessed before. The trail grew colder as the day advanced. Running Fox pushed himself harder, knowing that each passing hour diminished the already slim chances of finding Abigail Bennett alive. He followed traces that would have been invisible to most, minute disturbances in snow patterns, the way certain drifts had formed around an obstacle that was no longer present, the absence of frost on certain surfaces. As the sun began its early winter descent, he finally spotted something distinct, a dark shape against the endless white, half buried in a snowdrift in a small ravine. Drawing closer, his breath caught. It was Abigail Bennett, curled into a tight ball, snow partially covering her still form. Running Fox approached cautiously, prepared for the worst. Her skin had taken on the waxy, pale blue appearance of extreme cold exposure. But as he knelt, beside her, a miracle, the faintest cloud of condensation from her parted lips. Somehow, against all odds, Abigail Bennett was alive. Running Fox knew he had precious little time. Abigail Bennett clung to life by the thinnest of threads, her breathing shallow, her pulse faint beneath his fingertips. The ravine offered some protection from the wind, but the temperature continued to drop as evening approached. With practiced movements, Running Fox cleared snow from around her body. Abigail had lost her mittens, and her hands showed the mottled purple-white of severe frostbite. Her boots remained, but her coat had been partially unbuttoned, a telltale sign of paradoxical undressing, when hypothermia victims feel burning, heat and remove clothing, hastening their demise. Running Fox removed the buffalo hide coat he wore, wrapping it around Abigail's frozen form. From his pack, he withdrew a small tin of bear grease mixed with herbs, a remedy his mother had taught him to make. He applied it gently to Abigail's exposed skin, particularly her face and hands, to protect against further damage from the cold. "Bennett woman," he said close to her ear, his voice firm despite knowing she likely couldn't hear him. "Your husband searches for you. Your spirit must fight now." He needed to make decisions quickly. Night would fall within 2 hours. The Bennett cabin lay nearly 8 miles away, the settlement further still. His own people's winter camp was closer, perhaps 5 miles to the northwest, but traversing that distance with an unconscious woman through snow-choked terrain presented an enormous challenge. The most immediate need was warmth. Running Fox gathered what scarce materials he could find: dead branches protruding from the snow, dried grass from beneath overhangs, bark stripped from nearby trees. Using his flint and steel, he coaxed a small flame that gradually strengthened. The fire wouldn't last long with so little fuel, but it might provide enough heat to stabilize Abigail before the journey. As he worked, Running Fox considered the troubling circumstances of Abigail's disappearance. The false message that had lured her into the blizzard suggested deliberate malice. Who would wish harm upon this woman, and why? These questions would need answers, but survival took precedence now. Once the fire burned steadily, Running Fox constructed a travois, a traditional A-frame sled made from sturdy branches lashed together with strips of leather from his pack. He layered it with pine boughs for insulation, then carefully transferred Abigail onto it, securing her with more leather strips. "I will take you to my people," he told her unconsciously. "Our medicine is strong. If your spirit is also strong, you may yet see another sunrise." With the travois secured to his shoulders, Running Fox began the arduous journey northwest. Each step required tremendous effort, breaking trail through deep snow while dragging Abigail's weight behind him. The light faded quickly, but the nearly full moon reflected brilliantly off the snow, providing enough illumination to navigate. An hour into the journey, Abigail stirred, emitting a soft moan. Running Fox paused, kneeling beside the travois. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. "Be still," he instructed gently. "You are safe now." "Cold," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "So cold." "Yes," he agreed, "but soon you will be warm. Save your strength." Her eyes drifted closed again, but the brief moment of consciousness encouraged him. Her will to survive remained intact despite her ordeal. Running Fox resumed his punishing pace, ignoring the burning in his thighs and shoulders. The temperature had plummeted further after sunset, likely approaching 30 below zero. His own extremities began to lose sensation, despite his buckskin leggings and well-insulated moccasins. When he finally glimpsed the smoke from his people's lodges rising against the star-filled sky, Running Fox sent up a silent prayer of thanks to Wakantanka, the Great Spirit. He had reached the limit of his endurance. The camp's sentries spotted him from a distance, 2 young warriors hurrying out to meet him. Their expressions shifted from wariness to surprise when they saw the travois and its occupant. "A white woman," one asked in Lakota. "Why do you bring her here?" "She is dying," Running Fox replied simply, "and I have made a promise." The sentries exchanged uneasy glances, but helped guide the travois into camp. Word spread quickly, and by the time they reached the central area between the teepees, a crowd had gathered. Chief Grey Wolf emerged from his lodge, his weathered face impassive as he surveyed the scene. Running Fox, he acknowledged. I see you bring trouble to our camp. Running Fox met his chief's gaze steadily. I bring one who needs help. The woman. From Eagle Creek. The one who treats our people with respect. Grey Wolf studied Abigail's still form. The whites will blame us if she dies. They will thank us if she lives, Running Fox countered, and either way, it was the right thing to do. After a long moment, Grey Wolf nodded once. Take her to Singing Bird's Lodge. The medicine woman will do what she can. Relief washed through Running Fox as he guided the travois toward his mother's teepee. Singing Bird already stood outside, her silver-streaked hair gleaming in the moonlight, alerted by the commotion. My son brings interesting gifts, she remarked, dryly in Lakota, then switched to English. Bring her inside, quickly. The interior of Singing Bird's lodge was warm from a well-maintained central fire. Furs covered the ground, and bundles of dried herbs hung from the support poles. The medicine woman directed them to place Abigail near the fire, immediately assessing her condition with practiced hands. She has been in the cold too long, Singing Bird muttered. The spirits may already be calling her. Running Fox recounted what had happened as his mother worked, describing the mysterious false message and how he had tracked Abigail through the snow. Singing Bird listened silently, her fingers never ceasing their careful examination of Abigail's frostbitten extremities. When Running Fox finished, she sighed deeply. Someone wanted this woman dead, she concluded, but the question is whether we want her alive badly enough to risk the settlers' anger. I do, Running Fox stated firmly. Singing Bird smiled faintly. Yes, I see that. Very well. But the white people must be told she is here. If she dies in our care, they will think we killed her. I will go at first light, Running Fox promised. Through the night, Singing Bird worked tirelessly. She prepared poultices of pine resin and bearberry leaves for Abigail's frostbitten hands and feet, brewed teas of willow bark and echinacea to combat fever, and chanted healing songs while burning sacred herbs. Running Fox assisted, applying warm compresses and helping to gradually raise Abigail's body temperature. Too much heat too quickly could shock her system fatally, a lesson his people had learned through generations of surviving harsh winters. Near dawn, Abigail regained consciousness more fully. Her eyes opened, fixing first on the hide covering of the teepee above her, then shifting to Singing Bird's face as the medicine woman wiped her brow with a damp cloth. Where? She managed, her voice cracked and weak. You are with the Lakota, Singing Bird answered calmly. My son found you. In the snow. Abigail's gaze moved to Running Fox, recognition dawning slowly. You saved me. He nodded once. You would have done the same. Thomas, she whispered, your husband searches for you. Running Fox explained. I go now to tell him you are here. That you live. Tears formed in Abigail's eyes. Thank you, she whispered. The note, it wasn't real. Someone wanted me. Hush now, Singing Bird interrupted gently. Save your strength. Questions will come later. As promised, Running Fox departed at first light, traveling toward Eagle Creek. The storm had passed, leaving behind a crystalline landscape of unbroken white under a brilliant blue sky. The beauty belied the deadly cold that still gripped the territory. He reached the Bennett cabin by mid-morning, finding it empty but with fresh tracks leading toward the settlement. Following them, he arrived at Eagle Creek to find most of the men preparing for another day of searching, their faces haggard from cold and lack of sleep. Thomas Bennett stood among them, his eyes hollow with grief and exhaustion. When he spotted Running Fox approaching, hope and dread battled across his features. You found her? He asked immediately, pushing through the gathered men. Running Fox nodded. She lives, but she is weak. I took her to my people's camp. Murmurs. rippled through the crowd, surprise, suspicion, relief. Thomas seemed to sway on his feet, steadying himself against Jacob Winslow's shoulder. Will she? He couldn't finish the question. My mother is a healer, Running Fox explained. She fights for your wife's life. The frostbite is severe, but Abigail Bennett has a strong spirit. Winslow stepped forward, his expression guarded. Why bring her to your camp instead of back here? She would have died on the journey, Running Fox stated simply. My camp was closer, and my mother's medicine is good for cold sickness. Thomas straightened, newfound energy in his movements. Take me to her now. Several men protested, warning of potential danger, but Thomas silenced them with an upraised hand. This man saved my wife when none of us could find her, he said firmly. I trust him with my life, as Abigail has trusted him with hers. Preparations were made quickly. Thomas gathered blankets, clean clothing for Abigail, and what medical supplies the settlement could spare. Jacob Winslow insisted on accompanying them, along with Matthew Carter, a former military man who served as the settlement's unofficial security chief. The journey to the Lakota camp took most of the day, slowed by the settlers less experienced. Navigation through the snow-covered terrain. Running Fox led patiently, allowing rest when needed, though his concern for Abigail's condition made him anxious to return quickly. As they approached the camp, Running Fox signaled for the group to halt. I must go first, he explained, to tell my people you come in peace. The settlers waited tensely while Running Fox entered the camp alone. He spoke with Chief Grey Wolf, explaining the situation and requesting permission for the white men to enter. After some deliberation, Grey Wolf consented, but with conditions. They may come unarmed, the chief declared, and only to the edge of the camp. The woman's husband alone may enter the healing lodge. Running Fox returned to the waiting settlers, relaying the terms. Carter objected strenuously, but Thomas immediately removed his pistol and handed it over. I don't care about conditions, he stated. Just take me to my wife. Winslow and Carter reluctantly surrendered their weapons as well. Running Fox led them toward the camp, where a delegation of Lakota warriors watched warily. At the edge of the encampment, Running Fox guided Thomas alone toward his mother's lodge, leaving Winslow and Carter under the watchful eyes of the warriors. Inside, the teepee. Abigail lay wrapped in furs near the central fire. Her face had regained some color, though the tips of her ears and nose showed the dark discoloration of frostbite. Singing Bird sat beside her, mixing a remedy in a small bowl. When Thomas entered, a choked sob escaped him. He rushed to Abigail's side, falling to his knees and gently taking her hand in his. Abigail, he whispered. My God, Abigail. Her eyes fluttered open, focusing slowly on his face. A weak smile formed on her cracked lips. Thomas, she breathed. You found me. No, he corrected, tears flowing freely down his weathered cheeks. Running Fox found you. I failed you. Singing Bird rose silently, motioning for her son to follow her outside to give the couple privacy. Outside the lodge, Chief Grey Wolf approached. The white leaders wish to speak with you, he told Running Fox. They have questions about the woman. Running Fox nodded and walked with his mother and the chief to where Winslow and Carter waited at the camp's edge. The tension was palpable, with warriors and settlers eyeing each other suspiciously. How is Mrs. Bennett? Winslow asked immediately. She will live, Singing Bird answered in accented but clear English, surprising the settlers. But her recovery will take time, and she may lose fingers, perhaps toes. Carter stepped forward, his military bearing evident. We appreciate what you've done, but we'd like to transport her back to the settlement as soon as possible, where she can receive proper medical attention. Singing Bird's expression hardened. You have a healer better trained than I for cold. A sickness? When Carter hesitated, she continued, I thought not. The woman stays until she is strong enough to travel without risk. 3 days, perhaps 4. Winslow intervened before Carter could argue further. "We're grateful for your help, truly, but surely you understand our concern." "Your concern," Running Fox noted, "should be finding who sent the false message that led Abigail Bennett into the storm." This redirected their attention immediately. "What a false message?" Winslow demanded. Running Fox explained about the note claiming Mrs. Larson was in labor and how he had deduced from tracking Abigail that she had been deliberately misled. Carter's expression darkened. "That's a serious accusation. Who would do such a thing?" "That," said Running Fox, "is what you should be asking in your settlement." Someone there wished her harm. The revelation created an uncomfortable silence. Finally, Winslow spoke again. "We'll investigate this thoroughly, but for now our priority is Mrs. Bennett's recovery." "As is ours," Chief Grey Wolf stated with finality. "She will remain under Singing Bird's care until it is safe for her to travel. The husband may stay if he wishes. You two must return to your people with this news." Though clearly displeased, Carter and Winslow recognized they had little choice. After a brief visit with Thomas and Abigail in the healing lodge, they prepared to depart, accepting Running Fox's offer to guide them partway back. Before leaving, Winslow approached Running Fox privately. "I misjudged you," he admitted. "We all did. Whatever happens from here, you have the thanks of Eagle Creek Settlement." Running Fox acknowledged this with a nod. "Actions speak louder than words. Remember that when you return to your people." As Winslow and Carter departed, guided for the first few miles by a Lakota warrior, Running Fox returned to his mother's lodge. Thomas sat beside Abigail, who had drifted back to sleep, her breathing steadier than before. "Your wife mentioned something about the note," Running Fox said quietly. "That it wasn't real. Has she said more?" Thomas shook his head. "She's been mostly asleep, but I've been thinking about who might have done this." His expression hardened. "There aren't many possibilities." "Who?" Running Fox pressed. "William Hollister," Thomas replied, his voice low with controlled anger. "He wanted our land, made offers several times, said it was perfect for the cattle operation he's planning. When we refused to sell, he became unpleasant." Running Fox considered this. A man who would murder for land? "I didn't think so," Thomas admitted. "But now, I'm not certain of anything except that someone tried to kill my wife." Singing Bird entered, carrying fresh bandages and her medicinal pastes. "The healing comes first," she reminded them. "Justice follows after." For 3 days, Abigail remained in Singing Bird's lodge, gradually regaining strength. The frostbite on her extremities proved severe. 3 fingers on her left hand and 2 on her right would likely be lost, along with several toes. But she would survive, and in frontier terms, that constituted a miracle. Thomas stayed by her side, sleeping on furs near the lodge entrance. Initially awkward among the Lakota, he gradually relaxed as the tribe's initial wariness gave way to curiosity and then a form of grudging acceptance. Several times daily, tribal members brought food and water to the lodge or stopped by to check on the healing progress. On the 4th day, a delegation from Eagle Creek arrived, led by Jacob Winslow. With them came startling news. William Hollister had disappeared the night after Winslow and Carter had returned with word of Abigail's survival. His hasty departure all but confirmed his guilt. "We found evidence in his cabin," Winslow explained to the gathered group of settlers and Lakota leaders. A draft of the note sent to Mrs. Bennett and a journal detailing his plans for the Bennett property once they were out of the way. He apparently hoped both would perish in the storm. Chief Grey Wolf's expression remained impassive at this news, but his words carried the weight of judgment. The white man's evil nearly cost 2 innocent lives, the woman's and my son's, who risked himself to save her. Winslow nodded soberly. "We've sent riders to Fort Peterson. The army will hunt Hollister down to face justice." The revelation brought closure, but left lingering questions about trust and security in the isolated frontier community. That evening, As preparations were made to transport Abigail back to Eagle Creek the following morning, Running Fox sought her out for a private conversation. He found her sitting up for the first time, wrapped in furs near the lodge entrance, gazing at the stars visible through the smoke hole above. "The sky spirits welcomed you back," he observed, sitting cross-legged nearby. Abigail smiled faintly. "Your mother says I owe my life to your tracking skills and her medicine." Running Fox shrugged. "You owe your life to your own strong spirit. I merely found the vessel. She merely helped heal it." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Abigail spoke again. "I remember pieces of it. The cold, the confusion, thinking I saw lights ahead that kept disappearing, finding the cave." She shuddered. "Something screamed in the night. A mountain lion, I think. I fled, though I knew I shouldn't." "That explains much," Running Fox nodded. "I wondered why you left the shelter. When you found me," she continued, "I was certain you were a spirit guide coming to lead me to the other side." A small laugh escaped her. "Instead, you led me back to life." "Two worlds touched," Running Fox observed. "Yours and mine. Perhaps that is how it should be more often." Abigail's expression grew serious. "Will you come visit us when we return to our cabin?" Running Fox considered this. The winter makes travel difficult, but when spring comes... He nodded. "Yes, I will come." "Good," she said simply, "because I still have many questions to ask." Dawn broke clear and bright on the day of Abigail's departure from the Lakota camp. A procession had been arranged, a tramway constructed with far more comfort than the emergency version Running Fox had used for her rescue, lined with furs and covered with a canopy of hides to protect against the winter sun's glare. 4 men from Eagle Creek would take turns pulling it, following a path meticulously cleared by others who had come ahead. Thomas helped Abigail dress in clean clothes brought from their cabin, his movements gentle around her bandaged hands and feet. The severity of her injuries became more apparent in daylight. The blackened tips of fingers, the swollen patches of frostbitten skin. Yet compared to the near-death state in which Running Fox had found her, these wounds represented victory. "I never thought I'd be so happy to feel pain," Abigail remarked, as Thomas eased a loose moccasin over her bandaged foot. Singing Bird had provided the soft footwear, her own handiwork, as the settlers' leather boots would be too constrictive for the healing process. "Pain means life," Thomas agreed, his voice thick with emotion, "and life is all that matters now." Outside, final preparations were underway. Jacob Winslow conferred with Chief Grey Wolf, their conversation a mix of halting English and sign language. The terms of their discussion soon became clear. 2 Lakota warriors would accompany the party back to Eagle Creek, both to assist with the journey and to observe Abigail's continued care once there. Some settlers muttered objections, but Winslow silenced them with a sharp gesture. "These people saved Mrs. Bennett when we couldn't. We'll extend every courtesy." As Abigail emerged from the lodge, supported by Thomas, an unexpected sight greeted her. The women of the tribe had formed a line leading to the waiting travois. Each held some small gift, a beaded pouch, a carved wooden charm, a tiny buckskin doll, bundles of dried herbs. As Abigail passed, they placed these offerings around her on the travois. "What's happening?" she whispered to Thomas. Singing Bird, walking behind them, answered instead. "They honor your courage. To survive the white death of winter earns respect among Lakota." She gestured to the gifts. "These carry protection, healing, and strength. And for your journey ahead." Tears welled in Abigail's eyes. "I don't know how to thank them." "You already have," Singing Bird replied enigmatically. "By living." At the travois, Running Fox waited. He had dressed formally for the occasion in a fringed buckskin shirt adorned with porcupine quill work. his hair braided neatly with strips of red cloth woven through. Around his neck hung a pendant of carved antler, a running fox, its curves flowing with remarkable artistry. As Thomas helped Abigail settle onto the fur-lined transport, Running Fox approached. Without ceremony, he removed the pendant and placed it in her bandaged palm, carefully closing her fingers around it. "May it guide you when paths grow unclear," he said simply. Abigail studied his face, searching for words adequate to express her gratitude. Finding none, she simply nodded, the gesture conveying what language could not. Chief Grey Wolf stepped forward, raising his hand in formal farewell. "The woman who survived the White Death," he pronounced, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd, "is sister to the Lakota now." A murmur rippled through both groups, settlers and tribal members alike surprised by this declaration. Such adoptions, even symbolic ones, were rare, particularly for white women. With final arrangements complete, the procession began moving south toward Eagle Creek. The two Lakota warriors, young men named Swift Elk and Black Feather, positioned themselves at the front and rear of the group. Running Fox remained behind, though he stood watching until the party disappeared over the horizon. The journey proved less arduous than anticipated. The settlers had spent the previous day clearing the trail, and the bright sun had begun the slow process of melting the surface snow, creating a crust firm enough to walk upon in many places. Still, they traveled cautiously, unwilling to risk any further harm to Abigail. They made camp at midday, erecting a temporary shelter around Abigail's travois. Swift Elk demonstrated his medical knowledge, changing her bandages with a delicate touch and applying fresh salves from supplies Singing Bird had provided. "Your mother taught you well," Abigail observed, watching him work. The young warrior looked up, surprised she had addressed him directly. After a moment's hesitation, he answered in careful English, "My grandmother was a healer before Singing Bird. Knowledge passed down." Thomas watched the interaction with a thoughtful expression. Later, as they continued their journey, he shared his reflections with Jacob Winslow. "We've been neighbors to these people for 2 years, he said quietly. "Yet I've learned more about them in 3 days than in all that time." Winslow nodded soberly. "Fear builds walls. Perhaps it took something like this to break them down." He glanced back at Swift Elk, who walked steadily behind the travois. "Though I suspect not everyone will see it that way." His prediction proved accurate. As they approached Eagle Creek in the late afternoon, the settlement came alive with activity. Nearly every resident turned out to witness Abigail's return and the unprecedented sight of Lakota warriors accompanying her. Reactions varied widely. Some, particularly those who had participated in the search, greeted the Lakota with cautious respect. Others hung back, suspicion evident in their stance and expressions. A few women hurried forward to fuss over Abigail, their concern genuine, but tinged with morbid curiosity about her ordeal. Sarah Larson pushed through the crowd, tears streaming down her face. "Abigail, thank God," she cried, grasping her friend's arm. "When we heard about that terrible note with my name on it—" She broke off, overcome with emotion. Abigail squeezed her hand weakly. "It wasn't your fault, Sarah. Hollister's got a lot to answer for," Peter Larson growled, coming up beside his wife. "Army patrol rode out yesterday, said they'd drag him back if they had to tie him to his saddle." Reverend Montgomery stepped forward, raising his hands for quiet. "Let's not overwhelm Mrs. Bennett," he admonished the crowd. "She needs rest, not commotion." He turned to Thomas. "We've prepared the Widow Parker's house for you both. It's closer to the settlement center, and Mrs. Parker is happy to stay with her daughter until Abigail recovers." Thomas nodded gratefully. The thought of returning to their isolated cabin, where this nightmare had begun, held little appeal. As they approached the widow's neat clapboard house, Swift Elk and Black Feather hesitated, uncertain of their role now that the journey was complete. Winslow addressed them in halting sign language, then turned to Thomas. "I've invited them to stay the night. They can bunk in the meeting hall." Several settlers began to protest, but Thomas cut them off. "These men are here at my request," he stated firmly, though in truth no such request had been made. "Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me directly." No one did. The authority in Thomas's voice, so unlike his usually mild manner, surprised even himself. Grief and gratitude had hardened something in him, a determination that the sacrifice and goodwill shown by Running Fox and his people would not be cast aside. That evening, as Abigail rested in the widow's comfortable bed, Thomas sat with Swift, Elk and Black Feather in the settlement's small meeting hall. A handful of curious residents had joined them, including Reverend Montgomery and Matthew Carter. Communication proved challenging, but not impossible. Black Feather knew more English than his companion, while Carter had picked up some Lakota phrases during previous frontier postings. Between broken sentences and elaborate hand gestures, a conversation of sorts unfolded. "How did Running Fox find Mrs. Bennett when our search parties couldn't?" Carter asked, professional interest evident in his tone. Black Feather considered the question carefully before answering. "He read the snow, where it breaks differently, where wind makes patterns wrong." He tapped his temple. "He sees what is not there." The settlers exchanged glances, not fully comprehending but impressed nonetheless. "And the medicine your people used," Reverend Montgomery ventured, does it involve spirits?" Black Feather finished, a hint of amusement, crossing his stoic features. "Yes, but also plants, knowledge of the body, cold sickness, a very old enemy. Many generations learn to fight it." The discussion continued late into the evening, ranging from practical topics like weather prediction to more philosophical questions about different conceptions of faith and healing. Though halting and sometimes awkward, it represented a breakthrough in understanding, the first genuine dialogue between the communities since they had become uneasy neighbors. The following morning brought unexpected news. A rider arrived from Fort Peterson, his horse lathered from hard travel. "They found Hollister," he announced to the crowd that quickly gathered, "frozen to death 12 miles west of the fort. Looks like his horse threw him, and he couldn't make it to shelter before." Nightfall. A murmur ran through the assembled settlers, not quite satisfaction, but a certain sense of justice served. "Seems fitting," Jacob Winslow remarked. "Tried to murder by cold, killed by cold himself." Thomas received the news with complicated emotions. The desire for justice warred with the knowledge that no punishment could undo Abigail's suffering or restore her damaged limbs. Swift Elk and Black Feather departed that morning, carrying messages of gratitude for Chief Grey Wolf and Singing Bird, along with supplies from the settlement's stores: flour, coffee, sugar, and tools. These were officially presented as thanks for Abigail's care, though they also served as tacit acknowledgement that a new relationship had begun. As the weeks passed, Abigail's recovery progressed slowly but steadily. The worst of the frostbitten. Tissue gradually sloughed away, leaving her with permanent damage: 3 partial fingers on her left hand, 2 on her right, and several toes lost to the deadly cold. The scars on her face faded somewhat, but remained visible reminders of her brush with death. Throughout this difficult process, Abigail displayed remarkable resilience. Rather than dwelling on her losses, she focused on adapting to her new limitations. She devised creative ways to manage household tasks, despite her injured hands, and practiced walking daily, despite the pain in her damaged feet. The settlement rallied around the Bennetts. Women took turns helping with cooking and laundry. Men contributed labor toward modifying tools to accommodate Abigail's grip. Children brought wildflowers as soon as the first spring blooms appeared. The widow Parker refused to reclaim her house, insisting the Bennets remain there permanently. "That cabin of yours is too far out for someone in Abigail's condition," she declared. "Besides, I prefer living with my daughter's family. Too quiet on my own." Thomas eventually agreed, trading their remote homestead for the widow's property, and paying the difference with savings. The transition marked not just a physical relocation, but a shift in their place within the community, from peripheral newcomers to central figures in a settlement forever changed by Abigail's ordeal. Spring arrived with unusual gentleness that year. The snow melted gradually, sparing the region from the devastating floods that often accompanied sudden thaws. As the landscape transformed from white to brown to vibrant green, Abigail spent increasing time outdoors, soaking in sunshine that now felt like a precious gift rather than a given. One bright April morning, as she sat on the front porch stringing beans, a task she had relearned with painstaking determination, she spotted a familiar figure approaching from the north. Running Fox walked into Eagle Creek with the easy confidence of someone unconcerned by curious stares. He carried a small bundle wrapped in tanned hide and wore simpler clothing than on their parting, practical buckskins suitable for the warming season. News of his arrival spread quickly. By the time he reached the Bennett home, Thomas had been fetched from the carpentry shop he had established in town, and several neighbors had found reasons to linger nearby. "You came," Abigail said simply, rising carefully to greet him. Running Fox nodded. "I said I would." He glanced at her scarred hands, noting how she had adapted her movements to compensate for the missing fingers. "You heal well." "Thanks to your mother's medicine," she acknowledged, "and your courage." Thomas emerged from the house, wiping wood shavings from his hands. "Running Fox," he greeted warmly. "Welcome to our home again, but under better circumstances." The Lakota brave inclined his head in acknowledgement. "I bring something," he said, extending the hide-wrapped bundle to Abigail. "From my mother." Inside, the wrapping lay several small pouches of dried herbs, each labeled with careful pictographs, and a folded sheet of paper covered in neat handwriting. "The paper explains each medicine," Running Fox added. Singing Bird asked the missionary to write it for you, for pain, for strength, for healing scars. Abigail studied the unexpected gift, touched by the thoughtfulness it represented. "Please thank her for me," she said, "and tell her I'm learning to see beauty in scars now." Running Fox's visit, initially planned for a few hours, extended to a shared meal and then an invitation from Reverend Montgomery to address the settlement at evening services. Though surprised, Running Fox accepted with characteristic calm. That evening, the small church filled beyond capacity. Even those settlers who remained wary of the Lakota came driven by curiosity. Running Fox stood before them, his posture straight but not rigid, his gaze direct but not challenging. "My people have lived on these plains for many winters," he began, his English deliberate but clear. "Your people are newcomers here. We have fought, we have misunderstood, we have feared." He paused, looking around the room. But when the snow tried to claim Abigail Bennett, it was not Lakota or white who saved her. It was human helping humans. Murmur of agreement passed through the congregation. "The winter is cruel to all people the same," Running Fox continued. "So is hunger, so is sickness. Perhaps we can learn that help can be the same too." His words, simple but profound, resonated with many present. When Reverend Montgomery invited comments, several settlers stood to express similar sentiments. Jacob Winslow proposed regular trading days between the communities. Matthew Carter suggested exchanging knowledge about local terrain and wildlife. Sarah Larson offered to teach quilting to interested Lakota women if they would share their beadwork. Techniques in return: Not everyone embraced these ideas. A few families remained silent, their expressions skeptical or openly hostile. But they were the minority, and as the meeting concluded, a tentative plan had formed, a framework for cooperation that acknowledged both separate identities and common interests. As Running Fox prepared to depart the following morning, Abigail approached him with a gift of her own, a carved wooden box Thomas had made, filled with seeds from their garden. "Vegetables that grow well in this soil," she explained, "and flower seeds too, because beauty matters as much as food, Running." Fox accepted the box, understanding its significance went beyond practical value. "I will plant them near my mother's lodge," he promised, "so she can watch them grow." Their farewell held none of the uncertainty of their previous parting. Both understood this was not an ending, but a continuation, the next chapter in a relationship that would evolve alongside the changing seasons. As summer unfurled across the prairie, tentative connections between Eagle Creek and the Lakota band strengthened gradually. Trading days became regular events, held at a neutral location halfway between the communities. Knowledge flowed in both directions, settlers learning which native plants could supplement their gardens, tribal members experimenting with new tools and techniques. Abigail took particular interest in facilitating these exchanges. Despite her injuries, or perhaps because of them, she approached cross-cultural communication with remarkable patience and insight. She organized a successful harvest festival that autumn, where both communities shared foods, crafts, and stories. The transformation wasn't without setbacks. Old suspicions flared occasionally, particularly when outside influences, soldiers from the fort, tribal bands with different histories, passed through the area. Yet the foundation laid during that brutal winter proved remarkably durable. For Abigail and Thomas, life settled into a new rhythm. Their position within Eagle Creek remained central, their home often serving as an unofficial meeting point for visitors from both communities. Though Abigail never regained full use of her damaged limbs, she developed remarkable adaptations, eventually becoming known throughout the region for her finely detailed embroidery, an achievement all the more impressive given her limited dexterity. Running. Fox continued his role as liaison between the worlds, eventually bringing his wife Yellowbird to meet the Bennetts during one summer visit. The two women formed an immediate bond, their different backgrounds yielding to shared interests in medicine and handcrafts. The story of the blizzard rescue became something of a legend in both communities, retold with various embellishments, but always preserving its essential truth that humanity transcends boundaries when survival is at stake. Children from both cultures grew up hearing this account not as ancient history, but as lived experience, proof that cooperation offered strength that isolation could not match. Years later, when Running Fox's son and Abigail's daughter struck up a friendship while gathering medicinal plants along Eagle Creek, few in either community expressed surprise or concern. The seeds planted during that desperate winter rescue had grown into something neither side had anticipated, but both had come to value, a bridge spanning differences that once seemed insurmountable. And on cold winter nights, when blizzards howled, across the prairie, Abigail would sometimes touch the fox pendant she still wore, remembering how close she had come to becoming just another victim of the merciless plains. Instead, she had become something else entirely, living proof that even in the harshest wilderness, compassion could flourish in unexpected places. A decade passed since that fateful blizzard transformed the relationship between Eagle Creek and the Lakota band. The settlement had grown into a proper town, with a schoolhouse, a general store, and even a small newspaper printed on a hand-operated press. The Lakota, while maintaining their traditional seasonal movements, had established a more permanent winter camp near Blackwater River, with wooden structures supplementing the traditional tipis. Abigail Bennett, now 34, had become a respected figure in both communities. Despite her permanent injuries, or perhaps because of them, she possessed a quiet authority that few questioned. Her distinctive appearance, with scarred hands and the ever-present fox pendant, made her instantly recognizable throughout the region. After 5 years of trying, she and Thomas had been blessed with a daughter, Catherine, now 5 years old. And as curious about the world as her mother had been, the child moved easily between cultures, speaking English at home and rudimentary Lakota when visiting Running Fox's family. Her best friend was Willa, the 8-year-old daughter of Running Fox and Yellow Bird, an arrangement that would have seemed impossible before the rescue. It was early summer of 1887 when a new challenge arose to test the bonds forged in that long-ago winter. A railroad survey team arrived in Eagle Creek, led by a hard-eyed man named Victor Harding, who carried government papers authorizing him to plot a route for the Northern Pacific's newest branch line. "Progress can't be stopped," Harding announced at an impromptu town meeting, spreading maps across a table in the meeting hall. "This rail connection will increase property values tenfold. Eagle Creek will become a regional trade center." Many settlers received this news with enthusiasm. Rail access would mean easier shipment of cattle and crops, more reliable delivery of supplies, and greater opportunity for growth. Thomas Bennett, now serving as town councilman, studied the proposed route with concern. "This cuts directly through the Lakota winter grounds," he observed, tracing the penciled line with his finger. Harding barely glanced up. "The route is determined by geography and cost, not by where some Indians prefer to camp. Besides," he added, with a dismissive wave, "they don't hold title to that land. It's government property. They've wintered there for generations," Thomas countered. "We have agreements." "Local agreements don't supersede federal authority," Harding interrupted. "I sympathize with your concerns, Bennett, but my job is to survey the most efficient route. The railroad will be built one way or another." Word of the railroad plans reached the Lakota camp quickly. Though they had relocated to summer hunting grounds, a delegation led by Grey Wolf's son Whitehawk, the chief having passed away 3 winters earlier, arrived in Eagle Creek within days. Running Fox, now a respected sub-chief himself, accompanied the delegation as interpreter. The years had added streaks of grey to his braids and deepened the lines around his eyes, but his bearing remained proud and his gaze direct. The meeting between Whitehawk and the town council grew tense within minutes. Despite Running Fox's careful translation, the cultural gap seemed suddenly as wide as it had been a decade earlier. "This cannot stand," Whitehawk declared, his voice carrying the same authoritative tone his father had possessed. "The Iron Road will frighten game, cut our hunting trails, and bring more settlers to take what little land remains to us." Jacob Winslow, now grey-haired but still influential, attempted diplomacy. "We understand your concerns, but this decision comes from Washington. We have limited ability to change the route." "Then use what ability you have," Running Fox interjected, momentarily stepping beyond his translator role. "Or the peace we have built will not survive." The meeting ended without resolution, the town council promising only to send a letter expressing concerns to territorial officials, a gesture all present knew would likely be ignored. As the Lakota delegation prepared to depart, Abigail approached Running Fox. "Come to our home," she invited. "We should talk privately." An hour later, Thomas, Abigail, and Running Fox sat at Bennett's kitchen table, speaking with the frankness their decade-long friendship permitted. "The railroad cannot be stopped," Running Fox acknowledged, surprising the Bennetts. "I have traveled east. I have seen the power of the white man's civilization. Fighting the iron horse is like fighting the wind." "Then what solution do you propose?" Thomas asked. "Not where the railroad goes, but what comes with it," Running Fox explained. "We need guarantees, hunting rights preserved in writing, payment for land used, jobs for our young men during construction." Abigail nodded slowly. Adaptation rather than resistance. My father fought change and watched our power diminish. Running Fox said quietly, I choose to shape change instead. He hesitated, then added, but White Hawk and many warriors disagree. They speak of resistance, perhaps even violence. The implications hung heavily in the kitchen air. The peaceful coexistence between Eagle Creek and the Lakota band stood at a precipice. We need a mediator, Abigail decided. Someone respected by both sides but beholden to neither. Thomas nodded. Judge Franklin Morrison. He handles circuit. Caught in this region but has no financial stake in Eagle Creek or the railroad, and he's shown fairness to Indian claims in the past. Can he be reached quickly? Running Fox asked. He's due in Westfield next week, Thomas confirmed. That's only a 2-day ride. Then I will delay any action from our young warriors until he comes, Running Fox promised. But time grows short. The survey stakes already plant seeds of anger. Thomas departed the following morning, riding hard for Westfield. In his absence, Abigail took it upon herself to calm growing tensions in town. Victor Harding's survey team had begun detailed measurements, driving stakes and clearing sight lines through the landscape, including areas the Lakota considered sacred. Rumors circulated that warriors had threatened surveyors near Blackwater Ridge. Harding responded by hiring armed guards to patrol the survey lines. The atmosphere grew increasingly volatile. On the 3rd day after Thomas's departure, Abigail received an unexpected visitor. Yellowbird arrived alone at the Bennett home, her expression troubled. I come without my husband's knowledge, she admitted, as Abigail welcomed her inside. Something has happened that changes everything. Yellowbird explained that a young Lakota warrior named Circling Hawk had discovered gold while hunting in the foothills east of their summer camp. A small but promising vein exposed by recent rains. Only the elders knew so far, but if word reached the settlers or the survey team, it would trigger a gold rush that would devastate Lakota lands far worse than any railroad. Why tell me this? Abigail asked, though she already suspected the answer. Because you are marked by the winter, Yellowbird replied, gesturing to Abigail's scarred hands. The spirits tested you and found you worthy of trust. We need your wisdom now. Abigail considered the implications carefully. The gold discovery complicated an already precarious situation. If revealed, it would bring hordes of miners and eliminate any leverage the Lakota might have in negotiations. If kept secret, it might eventually be discovered anyway, with the Lakota blamed for deception. Where exactly is this gold? She asked finally. Yellowbird produced a small hide map. Here, in the place you call Thunder Canyon, not directly in the railroad path, but close enough that a slight route change would cross it. Abigail studied the map, an idea forming. Does Harding know about Thunder Canyon's reputation? The canyon had gained notoriety 3 years earlier when a violent cloudburst had triggered a flash flood, drowning 2 settlers. Engineers might well consider it a hazardous location for railroad tracks. I don't believe so, Yellowbird replied. He only arrived recently. Then perhaps that knowledge, rather than gold, might be our tool, Abigail suggested. A reason to adjust the route that serves everyone's interests. That evening, Abigail invited Victor Harding to dinner, a courtesy he could hardly refuse, from one of the town's prominent citizens. As they ate, she skillfully guided the conversation toward safety considerations. Your work must require careful assessment of natural hazards, she observed, especially in territory prone to weather extremes. Harding nodded, warming to a technical subject. Absolutely. Gradient calculations, soil stability, flood risk, all critical factors. I wonder if you've been warned about Thunder Canyon. Abigail continued casually. We lost 2 good men there to a flash flood not long ago. The waters rose 20 feet in minutes. Harding frowned. Thunder Canyon? I don't recall that designation on my maps. Local name, Abigail explained, describing the location, the same area Yellowbird had indicated. The canyon narrows there, creating a natural funnel during heavy rains. Any structure built in its path would be vulnerable to washout. The surveyor's expression shifted from mild interest to professional concern. That definitely warrants investigation. Railroad bridges and grading represent significant investment. They must withstand local conditions. The seed planted, Abigail changed the subject, but the following morning Harding and 2 assistants rode out to examine Thunder Canyon, returning with grave expressions. "Mrs. Bennett," Harding acknowledged. "When he encountered her at the general store, I owe you thanks. That canyon shows clear evidence of repeated flooding. Building there would be foolhardy." He unrolled a map, pointing to penciled notations. "We'll need to adjust the route northward by approximately 2 miles. Abigail maintained a neutral expression. "Will that cause difficulties?" "Some additional grading required, but nothing insurmountable," Harding replied, "and far less costly than rebuilding after a washout. The revised route would bypass both the gold deposit and the most sacred portion of Lakota winter grounds, a solution that addressed multiple concerns without revealing the gold's existence." Thomas returned 2 days later with Judge Morrison, a silver-haired man with penetrating blue eyes and a reputation for incorruptibility. Running Fox and White Hawk agreed to meet them at neutral ground, the old trading site halfway between Eagle Creek and the Lakota summer camp. The negotiations lasted 3 days, conducted under canvas tents as summer sun baked the prairie. Judge Morrison mediated with remarkable patience, allowing each side to present concerns without interruption before guiding them toward practical solutions. The revised route, ostensibly adjusted for flood safety, served as the starting point. From there, the discussions expanded to include compensation for land use, guaranteed hunting access to traditional grounds, and employment opportunities for Lakota men during construction. White Hawk initially resisted compromise, but Running Fox's influence gradually prevailed. The young chief came to recognize that securing formal rights through negotiation offered more protection than risking armed confrontation. Victor Harding, focused primarily on completing his survey contract, accepted most modifications once judge. Morrison framed them as reducing potential future conflicts that might delay construction. By the 3rd day, a framework agreement emerged, one that would require approval from railroad executives and territorial officials, but that all parties present considered fair. Judge Morrison drafted the document in careful legal language, with Running Fox ensuring the Lakota fully understood each provision. As the gathering prepared to disperse, Running Fox sought out Abigail, who had attended as an observer. "Thunder Canyon was a clever choice," he remarked quietly. "Yellowbird told me of your conversation." Abigail met his gaze steadily. "Some secrets serve everyone best when kept," Running Fox nodded. "The gold will remain undisturbed for now," she confirmed, "though I can't promise forever." "Forever is not given to anyone," Running Fox philosophized. "We ask only for today's justice, not eternal guarantees." That autumn, as construction crews began preliminary work on the railroad line, following the adjusted route that bypassed both Thunder Canyon and the heart of the Lakota winter grounds, a different sort of construction took place as well. On the edge of Eagle Creek, near where the town limits met the open prairie, Thomas Bennett and a mixed crew of settlers and Lakota built a new structure, larger than a typical home but smaller than a public building. Its design incorporated elements from both cultures, with sturdy timber framing and a central gathering space reminiscent of a council lodge. "What exactly is this place?" Victor Harding asked during one of his final visits before moving on to his next assignment. "A meeting house," Abigail explained. "Neutral ground where representatives from town and tribe can gather monthly to address concerns before they become conflicts." Harding studied the building skeptically. Unusual approach. Most places I've surveyed, settlers and Indians barely tolerate each other. We learned a better way, Thomas said, exchanging a meaningful glance with his wife, through necessity and near tragedy. The railroad reached Eagle Creek the following year, bringing the promised economic benefits along with the inevitable challenges of rapid growth. New settlers arrived, many without the shared history that had shaped the unusual relationship between the original townspeople and the Lakota band. Tensions flared periodically, particularly when drought years limited resources for all. Yet the foundation laid during the blizzard rescue and strengthened during the railroad negotiations proved remarkably resilient. The meeting house became the heart of ongoing diplomacy, sometimes hosting difficult conversations, other times celebrations that brought both communities together. Children like Catherine Bennett and Willa grew up witnessing cooperation rather than conflict as the natural order. As Catherine's 10th birthday approached in the summer of 1892, Abigail planned a special gift. Working in secret with Yellow Bird, she commissioned a pendant to match the fox carving she still wore, this one shaped like a soaring eagle, representing her daughter's free spirit. The celebration took place at the meeting house, attended by families from both communities. As twilight approached, Running Fox asked permission to offer a traditional blessing for the child. Standing before the gathered crowd, he spoke first in Lakota, then translated, 10 winters ago, before this child drew breath, her mother was lost in the white death that covers our lands each year. From that near ending came a new beginning. Not just one life saved, but many lives changed. He gestured toward Catherine, who watched with solemn attention. This child is born of 2 worlds, not divided, but united. She walks between the Lakota and the white settlers with a foot in each, teaching us that boundaries exist in our minds more than on the land. Abigail, standing beside Thomas, absently touched the fox pendant at her throat. The years had softened, but not erased the physical marks of her ordeal. The missing fingers, the subtle scars on her cheeks, the slight limp from frostbitten feet, all remained visible reminders of how close death had come. Yet, as she surveyed the gathering, settlers and Lakota sharing food and conversation, children playing together without consciousness of difference, she recognized that the true legacy of that blizzard went far beyond her personal survival. Later that evening, as families began departing for their homes, Abigail found a moment alone with Running Fox near the meeting house entrance. "I never properly thanked you," she said quietly. Running Fox looked puzzled. "You have thanked me many times over many years." "Not for saving my life," Abigail clarified. "For what came after. For your willingness to build something new when you could have retreated to old divisions." The Lakota sub-chief considered this thoughtfully. "The blizzard taught both our peoples that the land shows no favorites. Cold kills the white man and the Lakota alike. The sun warms all without question. Perhaps we simply learned to listen to what the earth already knew." As they spoke, Catherine ran up with Willa, both girls breathless from play, their faces alight with excitement about some discovery in the tall grass behind the meeting house. Watching them, Abigail reflected on how a single decision, Running Fox's choice to search for a stranger in a deadly storm, had rippled outward through time, transforming not just her fate, but the destiny of 2 communities. "The best stories never truly end," she murmured, more to herself than to her companion. "They just flow into new beginnings." Running Fox smiled, understanding perfectly. "Like rivers joining the great waters," he agreed. "Separate streams becoming one current, stronger together than apart." In the fading light, with children's laughter carrying across the prairie and the distant whistle of a train, marking the inexorable advance of change, Abigail Bennett felt a sense of completion. The scars she bore would never vanish, but they had become something more than markers of suffering. They were testament to resilience, to the capacity of human hearts to expand beyond the boundaries of culture and custom when courage pointed the way. And as stars appeared in the darkening sky, she offered silent gratitude to the blizzard itself, the merciless storm that had nearly claimed her life but had instead delivered an unexpected gift. A future where division gave way to something wiser, something that honored difference while celebrating common ground. A future that, like the pendant she wore and the one her daughter now carried, linked past and present in an unbroken chain of remembrance and hope. The year 1897 marked 20 years since the blizzard that had nearly claimed Abigail's life and transformed the relationship between Eagle Creek and the Lakota. The railroad had brought prosperity and growth to the region, with Eagle Creek evolving from a modest settlement into a bustling town of nearly 2,000 residents. Thomas Bennett, now 52 with silver threading his once sandy hair, had risen to become mayor, a position he accepted reluctantly but fulfilled with characteristic thoughtfulness. His carpentry shop still operated under the management of his apprentice, though Thomas himself rarely worked wood these days except for special projects. Abigail, at 44, had established herself as the region's foremost mediator, called upon to resolve disputes not just between settlers and Lakota, but among various factions within the expanding community. The scars on her hands had become almost invisible to those who knew her well, though newcomers still sometimes started before catching themselves. Their daughter Catherine, now 15, balanced precariously between childhood and adulthood. Tall and strong-willed like her father, she possessed her mother's gift for languages and had become fully fluent in Lakota alongside her native English. She attended the town school, but spent summers with Running Fox's family, learning traditional skills that most settler children never encountered. Running Fox himself had aged with dignity into his early 50s. Still physically formidable, though more deliberate in his movements, he had succeeded White Hawk as chief when the latter died from pneumonia 3 winters earlier. The leadership transition had been smooth, with Running Fox's proven record of effective negotiation with the white authorities earning him widespread support within the tribe. Yellowbird had established a school of her own in the permanent Lakota settlement that had gradually replaced their seasonal camps, a place where tribal children learned both traditional knowledge and the reading and writing skills necessary for navigating the changing world. Her daughter Willa, now 18, assisted with teaching while preparing for marriage to a young Lakota man who worked as a translator for the Indian Agency. The meeting house Abigail and Thomas had established continued to serve its purpose, hosting regular councils that addressed everything from water rights to cultural misunderstandings. Its walls had been expanded twice to accommodate growing attendance, and its grounds now featured gardens that blended European vegetables with native plants, tended cooperatively by women from both communities. The relative harmony that had developed over 2 decades faced its greatest challenge in the spring of 1897, when government officials arrived with disconcerting news. Federal policy had shifted, with increased pressure for all tribal peoples to relocate to designated reservations farther west. "The current arrangement cannot continue indefinitely," explained Howard Dawson, the newly appointed Indian Affairs representative, during a tense meeting at the town hall. "Informal agreements between local settlers and tribal bands lack legal standing. Proper management requires centralization." Thomas Bennett, presiding as mayor, maintained a diplomatic tone despite his obvious concern. "Our arrangement with Chief E. Running Fox's people has benefited everyone involved for 20 years. Productivity and peace have flourished where conflict once seemed inevitable." Dawson remained unmoved. Admirable as that may be, it doesn't alter federal policy. The Lakota must relocate to the Pine Ridge Reservation within 6 months. Notifications have already been distributed. The news traveled quickly, creating apprehension in both communities. The Lakota, having witnessed the fate of other tribes forced onto increasingly diminished reservations, viewed the order with justified suspicion. Many Eagle Creek residents, particularly merchants who had developed trading relationships with the Lakota, worried about economic repercussions alongside humanitarian concerns. Running Fox called the council immediately, gathering elders and prominent tribal members in the ceremonial lodge at the center of their settlement. The discussion continued through the night, with opinions dividing between resistance, compliance, and various intermediary positions. "We have treaty rights to this land," argued Spotted Elk, a respected elder. "Papers signed by your grandfathers. And mine. The white government has no honor if these mean nothing." "Treaties have not protected other bands," countered Blackfeather, who had accompanied Abigail on her return journey 20 years earlier and now served as Running Fox's advisor. The Santee, the Yanktonai, all were told the same, yet all were moved when it suited the government's purpose. Running Fox listened patiently to all perspectives before offering his own. "We have something others did not," he noted. 20 years of peace with our white neighbors, shared prosperity, children who move between worlds. These give us strength not of weapons, but of alliance." After much deliberation, Running Fox sent word to Thomas and Abigail, requesting a private meeting at the Bennett home rather than the more public meeting house. The conversation that followed would reshape the fate of both communities. "The government leaves us few paths," Running Fox explained, seated at the kitchen table where so many crucial discussions had occurred over the decades. "Resistance means bloodshed, ours primarily. Compliance means suffering on barren reservation land where we cannot sustain ourselves." "There must be another option," Abigail insisted, the intensity in her voice matching that of the young woman, who had once asked endless questions about Lakota traditions. "Some legal appeal or exemption." Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "The railroad negotiations created a precedent, documented agreements with economic benefits for all parties involved." "Which brings me to my proposal," Running Fox continued. "Not resistance, not compliance, but transformation." His plan was audacious: formal incorporation of the Lakota settlement as a township adjacent to Eagle Creek, with clear boundaries, legal property ownership, and economic integration that would make forced relocation politically and financially untenable. "The government moves tribes who live as tribes," Running Fox explained, "but citizens who own property, pay taxes, and participate in commerce, those they find harder to displace." Thomas rubbed his chin pensively. "You're suggesting your people become, officially, part of the territory's governance structure, while maintaining cultural independence." "Exactly," Running Fox confirmed. "Not assimilation, but adaptation. We keep our ways, our language, our ceremonies, but we add what protects us in the white man's world: deeds, contracts, legal standing." Abigail studied her old friend's face, noting the strategic intelligence that had always lurked behind his stoic demeanor. "This isn't a new idea for you, is it? You've been considering this path for some time." Running Fox's lips curved slightly. "Since the railroad came, I watched, I listened, I learned. The future belongs to those who can walk in many worlds without losing themselves in any." The discussions expanded over subsequent weeks, involving town council members, tribal elders, territorial officials, and even Judge Morrison, now retired but still respected throughout the region. Legal precedents were researched, boundary surveys conducted, economic projections calculated. Opposition arose from multiple quarters. Some Eagle Creek residents feared closer integration would diminish property values or corrupt moral standards. conservative Lakota worried that formal incorporation would accelerate the erosion of traditional ways. Government officials in the territorial capital questioned the legal basis for such an arrangement. Throughout the increasingly heated debate, Abigail emerged as the plan's most effective advocate. Her unique position, respected in both communities and bearing physical evidence of the bond forged between them, gave her words particular weight. At a pivotal town meeting where opposition seemed poised to derail the initiative, Abigail rose to address the crowded hall. She rarely spoke publicly, preferring to exert influence through private conversations, so her decision to take the floor created immediate attention. 20 years ago, I walked into a blizzard carrying a false message, she began, her clear voice carrying to the room's farthest corners. That deception was meant to end my life. Instead, it began something none of us could have imagined. She touched the fox pendant that still hung around her neck. Running Fox tracked me through impossible conditions when no one else could find me. He carried me to his people when I was moments from death. His mother healed me with knowledge passed down through generations. Abigail extended her scarred hands, palms upward. I lost my fingers to the cold, but our community gained something far more valuable, proof that survival depends on cooperation, not division. The room had gone completely silent. Citizens and Lakota alike transfixed by her rarely shared personal testimony. For 2 decades, we've built something unique here. Our children grow up knowing 2 languages, 2 traditions, 2 ways of seeing the world. That doesn't make them confused. It makes them wise. She gestured toward Catherine, who sat with Willa near the hall's entrance. My daughter moves between these worlds, not as a stranger in either, but as a bridge connecting both. Is that not the future we want? Not just tolerance, but genuine understanding. Not just coexistence, but collaboration. The assembly remained quiet for several moments after Abigail finished speaking. Then Jacob Winslow, now elderly but still influential, rose shakily to his feet. I fought Indians before settling here, he admitted. Thought I knew what they were. Savages, obstacles to progress. He cleared his throat. I was wrong. 20 years watching our communities grow together taught me that. If incorporating their settlement protects what we've built, they have my vote. His endorsement broke the stalemate. After further discussion, the town council voted to support the incorporation plan and petitioned territorial authorities for approval. The legal battle stretched through summer and into autumn, with Thomas and Running Fox making multiple journeys to the territorial capital. Local attorney Michael Collins, who had studied law under Judge Morrison's guidance, represented both communities in their unusual joint application. By October, success seemed within reach. The territorial governor, impressed by the economic case and wary of potential unrest if the Lakota were forcibly relocated, indicated his willingness to approve the incorporation with certain conditions. The most significant, a unified school system serving both communities with instruction in English alongside Lakota language and cultural education. This condition sparked fresh debate within the Lakota community. Some viewed a joint school as threatening cultural survival. Others, including Yellowbird, saw opportunity in a formalized version of the educational exchange already occurring informally. As deliberations continued, nature intervened with a stark reminder of the interdependence that had shaped regional relations. An early blizzard swept across the territory in mid-November, catching many unprepared. Though not as severe as the famous storm of 1877, it trapped livestock, damaged buildings, and isolated outlying homesteads. The communities responded as one, with mixed rescue teams deploying to check vulnerable locations and bring stranded individuals to safety. Lakota trackers led settlers through whiteout conditions, while town resources supplied food and medical care to all in need. when Howard Dawson, the Indian Affairs representative, found himself stranded at Eagle Creek during the storm. He witnessed firsthand the practical benefits of the cooperative relationship he had been tasked with disrupting. Watching Lakota and settler families sheltering together in the meeting house, sharing resources and responsibilities without distinction, made a deeper impression than any legal argument. As conditions improved, Dawson sought out Abigail. "Mrs. Bennett," he acknowledged, finding her distributing coffee to volunteers, "I've seen territorial officials with fixed views before, usually in a mirror." His attempt at humor carried a note of humility. "I may have been hasty in my assessment of the situation here." Abigail offered a measured nod. "Policies created from a distance rarely fit local realities, Mr. Dawson. That's been true since the first pioneers arrived." "Indeed." He hesitated, then added, "I'll be recommending a special exemption for running. Fox is banned. The incorporation plan appears to serve federal interests in promoting self-sufficiency while respecting existing community structures." By spring of 1898, the legal framework was finalized. The newly incorporated township of Two Rivers, named for the confluence of Eagle Creek and Blackwater River, established itself adjacent to Eagle Creek with its own governance structure, aligned with territorial standards, but preserving cultural autonomy in key areas. Running Fox became the township's first mayor, with a council that included both traditional elders and younger members skilled in navigating between worlds. Thomas Bennett continued as Eagle Creek's mayor, with the two municipalities establishing formal cooperation agreements covering everything from water rights to mutual defense. The shared school opened that autumn in a newly constructed building, centrally located between the communities. Yellowbird and Catherine Bennett both joined the teaching staff, the former focusing on Lakota language and traditions, the latter on sciences and mathematics. Students attended core classes together, while cultural education remained partially separated to ensure depth of immersion in both traditions. The transition wasn't seamless. Cultural misunderstandings still occurred. Economic disparities persisted. Some families from both communities chose to leave rather than participate in the unprecedented arrangement. Yet the foundation proved fundamentally sound, rooted in 20 years of practical cooperation and mutual respect. On the 20th anniversary of Abigail's rescue, a special ceremony took place at the meeting house that had evolved into a cultural center serving both communities. Running Fox and Abigail, now bonded by decades of friendship and shared purpose, unveiled a simple monument, a stone marker carved with images of a fox and a woman in a blizzard, surrounded by text in both English and Lakota. The English inscription, "Read, from the deadly cold of winter came the warmth of understanding. From a woman lost in a blizzard and a brave who risked all to find her, grew two communities united in purpose, if distinct in heritage. May those who follow remember that boundaries exist to be crossed and differences exist to be respected." As the communities gathered to commemorate both the near tragedy and the transformation it had sparked, Catherine Bennett stood beside Willa, watching their parents accept the community's acknowledgement. The two young women, one preparing to attend university in Chicago, the other establishing a traditional healing practice, incorporating both Lakota medicine and modern techniques, represented the promise of the path their parents had pioneered. "Do you ever wonder," Catherine asked softly, "what would have happened if your father hadn't found my mother that day?" Willa considered the question. "The storm would have claimed her. Your father would have grieved. Our peoples would have remained, separated by fear and misunderstanding." She adjusted the eagle feather woven into her hair, a symbol of her new status as a healer in training. One life, one decision, changed the course of many rivers. As twilight settled over the gathering, Abigail found herself momentarily alone. watching the interactions between families who would once have viewed each other with suspicion, but now shared meals, traded goods, and entrusted each other with their children's education. Running Fox approached, moving more deliberately than in his younger days, but still carrying himself with inherent dignity. 20 winters, he observed, from near death to new life. Abigail nodded, touching the fox pendant that had become part of her identity. I've often wondered why you chose to search for me that day. A stranger, really. A white woman whose loss would have meant little to your people. Running Fox gazed toward the horizon, where the sun set in streaks of crimson and gold. I saw you as human before I saw you as white, he answered simply, just as you saw us as human before you saw us as Lakota. He smiled faintly. The rest followed naturally, like water finding its path downhill. As darkness fell, fires were lit, and the celebration continued with music from both traditions intermingling, drum circles and fiddle tunes creating an improbable harmony. Children who had never known separation played games that blended elements from both cultures, while elders from once opposing worlds shared wisdom across previous boundaries. Catherine sought out her mother as the evening progressed, finding her watching the festivities with quiet satisfaction. I've been thinking about your story, Catherine said. How different my life would have been if Running Fox hadn't found you, if I had even existed at all. Abigail embraced her daughter. Life turns on moments we rarely recognize as they happen, a choice to search when others abandon hope, a decision to trust when fear counsels otherwise. She glanced toward Running Fox, who sat with his grandchildren near the central fire. Your generation inherits not just what we built, but the understanding of how we built it. That's the true legacy. As the celebration continued under star-filled skies, Abigail Bennett contemplated the long, improbable journey from that desperate day in the blizzard to this moment of community celebration. The physical marks of her ordeal had faded with time, but the transformation it had sparked continued to shape lives across generations, proof that even the coldest storm could plant seeds of connection that, properly tended, would flourish long after the snow had melted into memory. By 1907, 30 years after Abigail's fateful encounter with the blizzard, the nation had transformed around the unique community that grew from that near tragedy. The Dakota Territory had become two separate states, with Eagle Creek and the adjoining township of Two Rivers situated in the southeastern region of South Dakota. The frontier era had given way to the progressive age, with automobiles beginning to appear alongside horse-drawn wagons on the streets of both municipalities. Thomas Bennett, now approaching 62, had retired from public office, passing leadership to younger generations. His health had begun to decline, a persistent cough troubling him through winter months, though he remained active in community affairs and continued to mentor aspiring craftsmen. Abigail, at 54, had published a memoir entitled Between Two Worlds that gained modest national attention for its account of frontier cooperation between settlers and Native Americans. The book had drawn educators and sociologists to visit the unprecedented dual community, studying what many viewed as a possible model for improved relations elsewhere. Catherine Bennett, 25, and recently returned from university with a degree in anthropology, had established a cultural preservation project documenting both Lakota traditions and pioneer experiences through oral histories and photography. Her work bridged academic research and community service, creating an archive that would later prove invaluable to historians. Running Fox, now in his early 60s, had gradually transferred leadership responsibilities to his son Greyhawk, while retaining his position as spiritual advisor to the tribal council. His hair had turned completely white, earning him the affectionate nickname white fox among the youngest generation, but his mind remained sharp and his counsel widely sought. The spring of 1907 brought a new development that would test the resilience of the communities once more. The federal government, under President Theodore Roosevelt's administration, announced an initiative to establish Native American boarding schools throughout the country with the explicit aim of civilizing indigenous children through immersion in Euro-American education, language and customs. Unlike previous challenges, this one struck at the heart of the carefully balanced educational system Two Rivers and Eagle Creek had developed together, one that combined standard American curriculum with respectful preservation of Lakota language, traditions, and knowledge. A federal inspector named Edwin Porter arrived to evaluate the local school and determine whether it met the government's new standards or would need to be replaced by a government-run institution. His preliminary assessment proved troubling. The integration of native customs and language into academic instruction contradicts established assimilation protocols, Porter wrote in his initial report. While academic performance meets acceptable standards, the preservation of tribal identities undermines the civilizing mission of proper education. The communities mobilized quickly to respond to this existential threat. Catherine Bennett, leveraging her academic credentials and the connections she had developed during her university years, initiated correspondence with influential reformers and progressive politicians sympathetic to indigenous rights. Running Fox's son, Gray Hawk, educated in both traditions and now serving as Two Rivers mayor, prepared a formal petition documenting the exceptional academic and social outcomes of their integrated educational approach. Graduation rates, literacy levels, and even economic indicators all demonstrated results superior to those of government boarding schools elsewhere. As tensions mounted and rumors spread that children might be forcibly removed to distant institutions, the communities organized a strategic response that drew on their 3 decades of cooperation. Rather than direct confrontation with federal authorities, they invited key officials, educators and journalists to witness their educational system firsthand. The resulting 3-day educational showcase became known as the Two Rivers Convention, attracting delegates from as far as Washington, D.C. and New York City. Students demonstrated proficiency in standard subjects alongside fluency in both English and Lakota. Cultural presentations highlighted how traditional knowledge enhanced rather than hindered academic learning. Most compelling were the testimonials from graduates who had succeeded in both worlds, young Lakota who had established thriving businesses or entered professions while maintaining cultural connections, and young settlers who had incorporated indigenous knowledge into agricultural innovations or medical practice. The event culminated in a formal address delivered jointly by Abigail Bennett and Running Fox, the two living symbols of the partnership that had given birth to this unique community. Though both had aged considerably from the days of the legendary rescue, their presence together on the stage carried undeniable power. 30 years ago, Abigail began, her voice softer than in youth but clear and steady, I walked into a blizzard, carrying a false message. The deception was meant to end in death, but instead became the foundation for something unprecedented. Running Fox continued, When I found this woman in the snow, I did not see an enemy, but a fellow human facing nature's harshest test. That simple recognition, our common humanity, has guided every step since. Abigail gestured toward the gathered delegates. You've seen our children these past days. They stand straight and proud, carrying two traditions not as separate burdens, but as complementary strengths. They face the future with both roots and wings. We do not oppose progress, Running Fox added. We embrace it. But progress that destroys wisdom gained over countless generations is no progress at all. Our children learn to read Shakespeare and calculate mathematics, but also to read the stars and calculate the medicines in plants. Both knowledge make them stronger. Their words, along with the undeniable evidence of the community's success, shifted the tenor of governmental evaluation. Edwin Porter, initially dismissive, found himself reconsidering his assumptions in the face of demonstrable results. In his revised report, Porter wrote, "While unconventional in approach, the educational system established at Two Rivers Eagle Creek demonstrates exceptional outcomes that warrant further study rather than disruption. The integration of cultural education alongside standard curriculum appears to enhance rather than detract from academic achievement. This assessment, coupled with growing national attention from sympathetic journalists, created sufficient political pressure to secure a formal exemption from the boarding school mandate. The Two Rivers model received designation as an experimental educational district, permitted to continue its integrated approach under regular evaluation. The victory proved bittersweet, however. The strain of the campaign had taxed Thomas Bennett's already compromised health. 2 weeks after the convention, he suffered a severe respiratory infection that quickly developed into pneumonia. Despite the best efforts of doctors from both traditions, conventional physicians working alongside Lakota healers, Thomas's condition deteriorated rapidly. Abigail remained at his bedside day and night, holding his hand just as he had held hers during her recovery 3 decades earlier. On a clear June morning, with sunlight streaming through the bedroom window of the home they had shared for nearly 30 years, Thomas Bennett drew his final breath. Abigail, Catherine, and their closest friends, Running Fox among them, gathered around as the community patriarch departed. His funeral became an unprecedented event in itself. A ceremony that honored his Christian faith while incorporating Lakota traditions of respect for those who had crossed to the spirit world. The entire population of both Eagle Creek and Two Rivers attended, united in grief for a man whose quiet strength had helped forge their unique bond. As summer progressed into autumn, Abigail confronted her new reality with characteristic resilience. Though widowed, she remained surrounded by community support and found purpose in continuing Thomas's legacy of bridge building between cultures. In October, as the first snow dusted the landscape, Running Fox visited Abigail at her home. Though their meetings had become less frequent as administrative responsibilities shifted to younger leaders, their friendship remained a cornerstone of community cohesion. "Winter approaches again," Running Fox observed as they sat on her porch, watching golden leaves swirl in the brisk wind. "The season that brought us together." Abigail nodded, adjusting the shawl around her shoulders. "Thomas always grew quiet when the first snow fell. I think he never fully escaped the memory of those days searching for me. He was a good man," Running Fox acknowledged. "He saw clearly when others looked through the fog." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Running Fox continued. "My granddaughter asks many questions about the great blizzard and the woman I found in the snow. She wishes to record the story properly in both our languages." Abigail smiled. "Catherine has been saying the same. Perhaps it's time. The young ones know we built something unusual here, but many don't understand how close it came to never existing at all." "A story that begins with a storm," Running Fox mused, "and continues through many seasons." As they spoke, making plans for a formal documentation project that would preserve their shared history for future generations, the first snowflakes of winter began to fall, gentle harbingers of the season that had once nearly ended Abigail's life, but instead had given birth to a legacy neither she nor Running Fox could have imagined on that desperate day 30 years before. The documentation project initiated by Abigail and Running Fox blossomed into something far more significant than either had initially envisioned. By 1912, as the 35th anniversary of the legendary blizzard rescue approached, the collaborative effort had grown to include dozens of contributors from both communities. Catherine Bennett, now 30, had emerged as the project's primary architect, working alongside Yellowbird's granddaughter, Singing Rain, a talented artist and writer of 25. Together, they collected oral histories from elders, assembled photographs spanning 3 decades, and transcribed handwritten letters and journal entries that chronicled the evolution of the unique partnership between Eagle Creek and Two Rivers. Their work soon expanded beyond mere historical documentation. Catherine, leveraging her anthropological training, developed a systematic approach to recording cultural practices that might otherwise fade with the passing of elders. Singing Rain complemented these efforts with detailed illustrations of ceremonies, tools, and clothing that captured nuances written descriptions might miss. The project gained unexpected momentum when Professor James Harrington from Columbia University visited in 1911, having read Abigail's memoir. Impressed by the community's collaborative approach to preservation, he secured a modest grant that allowed for the purchase of modern recording equipment. A phonograph that could capture the voices of tribal elders speaking Lakota and singing traditional songs that had previously been transmitted only through oral tradition. Abigail, at 59, contributed detailed accounts of her near-death experience and subsequent recovery, filling in gaps in the historical record with memories she had previously kept private. The hallucinations that had plagued her during extreme hypothermia, the excruciating pain of recovery, the moments of doubt and despair during her adaptation to permanent injuries. "I remember floating above myself," she dictated as Catherine transcribed her words, "looking down at my body in the snow, thinking how peaceful it seemed. Then Running Fox appeared, not as a man, but as an actual fox, nudging me back toward life. For years I thought this was mere delirium, until Yellowbird explained the concept of spirit animals and how they sometimes guide those between worlds. Such intimate details added psychological depth to what had previously been recounted primarily as a physical ordeal. Abigail also shared painful memories of the early months of recovery, when frustration at her limitations had sometimes overwhelmed her. "There were days I cursed Running Fox for finding me," she admitted, "moments when the constant pain made me wish he had left me to the mercy of the blizzard. I never told Thomas this. He carried enough guilt already for leaving that morning. But Yellowbird knew. She would sit with me during those dark moments, neither judging nor offering false comfort, simply witnessing my struggle until the darkness passed." Running Fox, approaching 70 and increasingly frail, though sharp-minded as ever, spent long hours with the young documentarians, sharing perspectives that revealed strategic wisdom behind actions many had interpreted as merely instinctive or compassionate. "Finding Abigail was not merely an act of humanity," he confided, his voice softer than in younger days, but still carrying authority. "It was also a choice to create possibility. Our people stood at a crossroads, conflict or cooperation. The blizzard provided an opportunity to demonstrate a different path. This revelation that Running Fox had recognized the potential diplomatic implications even while tracking a dying woman through a blizzard added new dimensions to a story many thought they already knew completely. "I had spoken with Chief Grey Wolf the day before," Running Fox elaborated. "He believed conflict with the settlers was inevitable as more arrived each season. I argued that finding common ground might protect our people better than resistance. When word came of the missing woman, I saw a chance to prove my point through action rather than words." The documentation effort culminated in a permanent exhibition installed in a specially constructed wing of the meeting house that had evolved into a community center. Designed to be accessible to visitors from other regions, the exhibition presented the story chronologically, beginning with the false note that lured Abigail into the blizzard and continuing through the many milestones of intercultural cooperation that followed. The exhibition featured innovative elements for its time, glass cases displaying artifacts like Abigail's original damaged clothing, beside the traditional Lakota healing tools used in her recovery, interactive elements where visitors could feel the weight of a traditional travois, or examine replicas of the snowshoes Running Fox had worn during the rescue, and a specially designed topographical map showing the exact route of the search and rescue. Perhaps most striking was the Blizzard Room, a darkened space where recorded winds played softly and projected images of swirling snow created an immersive approximation of the conditions Abigail had faced. Visitors emerged from this disorienting experience into a brightly lit display celebrating the community's shared accomplishments, a spatial metaphor for the journey from isolation to connection. As winter approached in 1912, plans formed for an anniversary commemoration that would coincide with the exhibition's official opening. Invitations went out to journalists, academics, government officials, and tribal representatives from other regions, curious about the Two Rivers model that had gained modest renown in progressive circles. Then, less than a month before the scheduled celebration, Running Fox fell ill. What began as a seemingly minor cold rapidly developed into pneumonia, his aging body struggling to fight the infection. Yellowbird, herself elderly but still serving as a healer, worked alongside Dr. Michael Winslow, grandson of Jacob Winslow, and the town's physician. The physician brought modern medicines, aspirin to reduce fever, oxygen to ease breathing difficulties, while Yellowbird applied traditional remedies including steam inhalation with pine resin and compresses of yarrow. This integration of medical approaches symbolized the very cooperation Running Fox had helped pioneer, though neither treatment succeeded in reversing his decline. Abigail visited daily, sitting beside Running Fox's bed in the comfortable home he shared with his son's family. She read to him from their nearly completed historical account, occasionally pausing to add anecdotes or correct details. Though increasingly weak, Running Fox remained engaged, offering clarifications and gentle corrections when memory differed from written record. During one such visit, he insisted on recording a message for future generations. Catherine brought the phonograph, and despite his labored breathing, Running Fox spoke for nearly 20 minutes about his hopes for the community's future. "The work we began must continue beyond our time," he dictated, each phrase measured and deliberate. "The easy path is to separate, to divide, to see only differences. The worthy path is to recognize our shared humanity while honoring our distinct traditions. Both can exist together, like two rivers flowing side by side, sometimes mixing waters, sometimes running clear and separate, but always moving forward in the same direction." On a snowy morning in late November, Running Fox's condition worsened. Dramatically, Greyhawk sent messengers to summon family members and close friends. Abigail arrived to find the house filled with quiet activity. Elders chanting healing prayers, younger family members speaking in hushed tones, children watching wide-eyed from doorways. She made her way to Running Fox's bedroom where Yellowbird met her with a somber expression. "He waits for you," the elderly healer said simply. Running Fox lay propped against pillows, his once powerful frame diminished, but his dark eyes still alert. When he saw Abigail, a smile touched his lips. "The woman from the snow," he greeted her, his voice barely above a whisper. Abigail took his hand, noting how the roles had reversed. Now she was the stronger one, he the one fighting for each breath. "The brave who found me," she responded, completing their long-standing exchange. "I had a dream," Running Fox told her, each word carefully measured to conserve strength. I was tracking you again through the blizzard, but this time we were both young and old at once, and the tracks went in circles. What does it mean? Abigail asked, recognizing the significance Lakota tradition placed on dreams. That endings are beginnings, he replied. The circle continues. They sat together as afternoon light faded and lamps were lit around the room. Family members entered periodically, speaking softly to Running Fox in Lakota or simply touching his shoulder in farewell. Grey Hawk performed a sacred pipe ceremony at his father's request, the sweet smoke filling the room with an aromatic haze as prayers were offered to the four directions. As evening approached, Running Fox asked to be left alone with Abigail for a final conversation. When others had withdrawn, he motioned her closer with a fragile hand. The exhibition, he said. It must include the truth about Thunder Canyon. Abigail looked startled. They had never publicly revealed the gold discovery that had complicated the railroad negotiations so many years ago. You're certain? She asked. After all this time, Running Fox nodded weakly. No more secrets in our shared history. The next generations must understand that we faced real choices, made real compromises, not just a simple story of friendship. I'll make sure Catherine adds it, Abigail promised, with proper context. Good. Running Fox's gaze drifted to the window where snow had begun falling, fat, lazy flakes that spiraled gently earthward. Snow comes again. The world turns white, hiding all boundaries. He reached for something beside his pillow, a small leather pouch worn smooth by decades of handling. This contained the medicine my mother used to save your life, he explained. I've carried it since her passing. Now it should return to you. Abigail accepted the pouch with reverence. I'll place it in the exhibition next to the pendant you gave me. Running Fox shook his head slightly. Not for display. For your granddaughter, Little Hawk. She shows interest in healing ways. The circle continues. Abigail nodded, touched by the significance of this final gift. Little Hawk, her daughter Catherine's 5-year-old child, had indeed shown unusual curiosity about both traditional Lakota medicine and modern medical practices. They sat in companionable silence as darkness fell completely. Running Fox's breathing grew more labored, but his expression remained peaceful. Near midnight, he squeezed Abigail's hand with surprising strength. I will find you again, he said simply. Through any storm. Those were his last words. Shortly after midnight, Running Fox slipped away quietly, his passing marked only by a deepening stillness in the room. The community mourned deeply. The planned celebration transformed into a memorial that honored not just Running Fox, but the legacy he had helped create. The exhibition opening proceeded as scheduled, with one significant addition, a special display detailing the Thunder Canyon gold discovery and the diplomatic solution it had inspired. As Abigail had promised, the truth was contextualized, not as deception, but as wisdom, an early example of the creative problem-solving that had characterized the community's unique relationship from its inception. Running Fox's funeral combined elements from both cultures in ways that would have been unimaginable prior to the blizzard rescue. Christian hymns interwoven with Lakota honor songs. Prayers were offered in both English and Lakota. His body, dressed in traditional chief's regalia, was placed on a scaffold in the old way for one day, then buried in the town cemetery beside. His wife, Yellowbird, who had passed 3 years earlier. The dual ceremony drew visitors from throughout the region, including several government officials who had come for the exhibition opening. Among them was Theodore Roosevelt himself, now post-presidency but still influential, who had read accounts of the Two Rivers experiment and arranged to include it in his speaking tour of the western states. The former president arrived after the funeral, but toured the exhibition with evident interest, peppering Catherine with questions about educational methods and governance structures. His initial skepticism gave way to genuine curiosity, particularly regarding the intercultural school system that had successfully withstood federal attempts at standardization. "Most extraordinary," Roosevelt commented as the tour concluded. "Not what I expected at all. Have you documented your methods thoroughly? This could inform policy elsewhere." Spring brought new growth to the communities, along with increasing national attention. An article in a prominent New York magazine highlighted the Eagle Creek experiment as a potential model for Indian policy reform. Several universities expressed interest in studying the educational system Catherine had helped document. For Abigail, however, Running Fox's passing marked a profound transition. Though surrounded by family and community support, she found herself increasingly reflective, aware that she represented one of the last living links to the events that had shaped 2 generations. On the anniversary of her rescue, the day running, Fox had found her half buried in a snowdrift. Abigail visited the stone monument at the Cultural Center. Now supplemented by the comprehensive exhibition, the simple marker still carried powerful resonance for those who understood its significance. As she stood in contemplation, Catherine joined her, linking her arm through her mother's. "I've been thinking," Catherine said after a respectful silence, "about legacy and continuity." Abigail glanced at her daughter, noting how the years had matured her once youthful features into a woman of substance and purpose. "What conclusions have you reached?" "That the most important parts of this story aren't in the exhibition at all," Catherine replied. "Not the political negotiations or economic arrangements, important as those were." "What then?" Abigail asked. "The human moments. Your breath formed clouds in the cold air when Running Fox found you. The way his mother sang healing songs through the night. The first time Thomas and Running Fox shook hands as equals." Catherine gestured toward the wider community visible through the center's windows. "Those moments created everything we see now." Abigail nodded, understanding her daughter's insight. "The official history tells what happened, but only those who lived it know how it felt. Which is why we need to preserve both," Catherine concluded. "The facts and the feelings." As they turned to leave, Abigail paused for one final look at the monument. The stone had weathered over 2 decades, softening its edges, just as time had softened the hard boundaries once separating 2 peoples. In the end, she reflected, it's not really about a woman lost in a blizzard or a brave who tracked her. It's about what happens when we recognize ourselves in others, especially those we've been taught to fear. Catherine squeezed her mother's arm gently. A lesson as relevant today as it was 35 years ago. Together, they walked back toward town, their footsteps marking fresh tracks in the spring soil, part of a continuing journey that had begun in the swirling snow of a Dakota blizzard, when one man had chosen to search for a stranger, and in doing so had found a future neither could have imagined. In the decades that followed, as the world experienced wars and depressions, cultural upheavals and technological revolutions, the communities of Eagle Creek and 2 Rivers maintained their unique partnership. Though not without challenges and occasional tensions, the foundation laid by Abigail Bennett and Running Fox proved remarkably durable. The onset of World War I tested community bonds as young men from both Eagle Creek and 2 Rivers enlisted. Letters home from these soldiers, fighting together in European trenches, spoke of how their bicultural upbringing gave them advantages. Lakota tracking skills proving valuable in battlefield situations, while shared language and cultural understanding fostered unit cohesion that officers noted with approval. The Great Depression struck the region hard, but the integrated economic approach developed over decades provided resilience absent in many surrounding communities. Traditional Lakota knowledge of wild food sources supplemented diminished commercial supplies. Communal resource-sharing practices, formalized during earlier cooperative ventures, helped distribute scarcity's burden across both towns. By the time Abigail passed away peacefully in 1932 at the age of 79, the Two Rivers model had influenced Indian policy reforms that would eventually find fullest expression in the Indian Reorganization Act under Commissioner John Collier, with several other communities adopting similar cooperative approaches. Her funeral drew mourners from across the country, former students who had benefited from the integrated education system, government officials who had studied the Two Rivers governance model, and descendants of the original settlers and Lakota, a band who had witnessed the transformation from its beginnings. Catherine, by then a distinguished professor of anthropology specializing in intercultural relations, delivered the eulogy, weaving personal remembrance with historical perspective. "My mother often said she owed her life twice over," Catherine told the assembled mourners. "First to Running Fox, who found her in the blizzard, and then to all of you, the community whose acceptance and support gave her life meaning beyond mere survival." The fox pendant that had rarely left her neck during life was buried with her, but its image lived on, incorporated into the official seals of both Eagle Creek and Two Rivers, a permanent reminder that even the harshest blizzard could give birth to unexpected warmth, if only someone was brave enough to search for it. Little Hawk, Catherine's daughter and Abigail's granddaughter, grew up with the medicine pouch Running Fox had entrusted to her. Following both her great-grandmother Yellowbird's traditional healing practices and formal medical training, she established a clinic that integrated approaches from both traditions, continuing the legacy of bridge building between cultures. The exhibition, created for the 35th anniversary, underwent multiple expansions over the decades, eventually becoming the nationally recognized Two Rivers Cultural Center. Visitors from around the world came to study what one historian termed an alternative model of frontier interaction, one based not on conquest or forced assimilation, but on mutual respect and practical cooperation. In 1977, a century after Abigail's fateful journey into the blizzard, her great-great-granddaughter Jennifer Bennett completed a documentary film titled Tracks in Snow that brought the story to national television audiences. The film featured interviews with elderly residents whose parents and grandparents had witnessed the original events, along with historians who contextualized the Two Rivers experience within broader patterns of American development. The film's most powerful segment featured a reenactment of the rescue journey, filmed during an actual Dakota winter storm, with Jennifer herself playing the role of her ancestor. The physical challenge of the production offered modern viewers a visceral understanding of what Running Fox had endured during his search, and what Abigail had survived during her ordeal. As the 21st century dawned, the communities of Eagle Creek and Two Rivers had long since grown together physically, though they maintained separate governing structures as a testament to their unique heritage. The educational model they had pioneered became a case study in multicultural curriculum development, with educators from diversifying communities nationwide studying their approach to honoring distinct traditions while fostering shared civic identity. And still, each winter when the first heavy snow blankets the Dakota landscape, residents tell children the story of Abigail Bennett and Running Fox, a reminder that the bonds of humanity can transcend the most formidable barriers, if only we are willing to brave the storm to find one another. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.